glassy blue ocean. A waterfall stretched endlessly along the horizon line. The water at the edge of the world was like a placid pond, as if enjoying a last few seconds of existence before cascading over the edge in a raging torrent of white-capped water. Directly in front of them was a crucifix's tree. Two enormous trunks were separate at the base, but they arched toward each other and joined at the top in a single leafy crown. Stars glittered beyond the waterfall, but the background was milky violet with tinges of deep blue. The sea water that plummeted over the edge disappeared into the abyss of stars. They had reached the end of the world. Jenna Helland, Godsend. This is an excerpt from Mythic Odysseys of Theros. We're going to be doing a review later on in the video. But before we get to that part, I want to let you guys know what happened in the last session that I played. Our story started out with our heroes, Ayushi, Love Trip, and Whisper, dreaming about living on an island right as something happens. They wake up. After hiring some workers to oversee their business at the end of the last adventure, they had been given a house as a reward for a bodyguard mission that they had gone on, and that took a couple sessions of adventuring, and now they have renovated it to be more like a restaurant, and they've decided that because they are a band, a literal band of adventurers, because they all just happen to have musical instruments, they're going to travel all across the land to find people to perform for and get paid, because who doesn't like to get paid? And while they were out traveling around, they came to a small fishing village near the coast. And there was a tavern there that was having a talent show. And so they decided that, we're going to make some extra money doing this. And so they all three did it. One of them had her monkey perform. The other one, a hypnosis show. And the third did a sleight of hand show. And she ended up actually helping one of the patrons flirt with a lady. So that was really fun. And there was a black-bearded gentleman who was very, very impressed with the group's performance amongst all the other performing people at the talent show. And he's looking to hire the group to keep up morale on board his ship with the remaining crew that he has, as well as having them help him to loot a mysterious island that is very, very difficult to get to, and even more difficult to get out of. After taking a little bit longer than he would have hoped for them to come to an answer, he decided it was his best course of action was to pull out a large sack of gold coins. In total, it was about 500 gold coins. Also, he let them know that they are free to take whatever treasures they can get their hands on, as long as they are also helping him to bring back the treasures. And they agreed. The next day, they boarded the ship, and they even left that same day. And after some time, they noticed a storm.
Rage against the dying of the light.
And they did not.
Go gentle into that good night.
They ended up crashing against a coral reef, their ship taking on water. Ayushi ran down to the cargo hold to secure the horses that they had brought with them, and they ended up getting on a longboat, almost missing the black-bearded pirate yelling for them to head to the island. And they could actually see off in the distance a outline of what looks like an island. They started rowing, and as they got within a couple hundred feet of the island, it actually started clearing up, and as if the storm was merely surrounding the island from a distance. They could see an old, weather-worn longboat and a campsite on the beach. It looked abandoned, so they made for it. They came to the conclusion that the other adventuring party that the black-bearded pirate, also known as Captain Rex, had attempted to hire in the past had probably made this camp and left this longboat behind. They decided that the best course of action was to follow a very, very faint set of footprints that Loveship was the only one to have been able to see. And so, trudging through the jungle, they came to a waterfall. Looking behind it, they found a shallow cave. At the end, clutching in its arms a chest, a skeleton lay on the floor. Looking through the chest, they found an old leather journal detailing the strangers in black and those other strange-looking fellows who acted more beast in person and the havoc that they wrought. They also found a small bag of red coins with a lightning bolt symbol etched on top. And that is where our last session drew its conclusion. Now, I would like to share with you why I did some of the things that I did and lessons that I've learned from this last session. This adventure that I started my main group on, keep in mind, I had two groups. This is my main group that I started with a year ago. This is an original adventure that I spent the entire month of July working on, from July 1st to July 31st, and a little bit into August. The image you're seeing right now is actually the cover of the adventure. If you are interested in checking it out, there will be a link to it in the description. We are playtesting to see where it shines and where I might have to rewrite some things. Thanks to my awesome roommates volunteering to edit it, I found some mistakes that I would not have found otherwise. Yeah, it's definitely a much better piece because of it. Well, right before we started playing, I thought it'd be really fun to do this small little introduction prologue where they would get to actually play as natives to the island and experience why the island became mysterious. However, I pretty much forced my players into it. One of them outright refused, even taking his headset off to not have to deal with it. People overtalk each other. People talked over each other, and the communication just wasn't very good, at least not in the beginning. This is why we play test adventures. Woo! You see, what the prologue actually did accomplish was slow down the game. It started the session off with a bad tension. Not the good kind of tension where it's like suspenseful, it's like, oh no, what's gonna happen? Thinking about it, I might actually be the reason why I had them do a talent show in the beginning. I needed a way to figure out how to get them from where they ended the last adventure to the start of the next adventure, and I actually wrote down multiple hooks, and I rolled the dice, and I picked one, and it happened to be the one where Captain Rex needed help looting this island. So to help me come up with time to figure out how I was going to do that and introduce Captain Rex, I randomly thought of the talent show. Like, talent shows are great, and my players loved it. They didn't question it. They didn't think it was weird at all. Like, sometimes as a DM, you're going to think something you're doing is weird, and then your players are going to experience it, and they're like, this was a lot of fun. My players really enjoyed doing a talent show. There was barely anything that happened. Nothing really plot significant other than meeting the plot hook, I guess. I guess that was kind of plot significant. So there was a part where my players were actually, it took them probably a good 5 to 10 minutes to figure out if they actually did want to go on this adventure or not. So I was kind of getting a little ready to move on, and as a DM, you got to keep the flow going. You got to keep, it's your job to keep the pacing going. If you can have really good pacing in a session, that session is going to be really, really fun for everyone, even if not a whole lot of crazy stuff actually happens. So to move things along, I decided to bribe them with a temptation that they would be very, very hard to resist. And what's harder to resist than someone offering you a large sack of money to do this task? especially when it's 500 gold. And they ended up spending it before they ended up going on the adventure. Anyways. Now, had they declined Captain Rex and done something different, I had other hooks that I would have just kept throwing at them until I either ran out of hooks, had to figure something else out, or they just accepted the adventure and went on. That's the thing when it comes to D&D. Sometimes your players aren't going to go for your adventuring hooks because the character they're playing just wouldn't accept that. Like if you're playing with a bunch of evil characters and you try and have the quest giver be a lady in distress needing them to go rescue her husband and child stuck in a house that is trying to eat them, well, it's probably not going to do it. Doing good for the sake of doing good only works for good, lawful good, anything good. Evil people want to do things for the sake of being evil, or if it's going to benefit them in the long run. So oftentimes just giving people a good chunk of money in the beginning will be more than enough. Granted, they didn't find very much else in that whole session other than the journal and the 30 red coins with the lightning bolt symbol on it. Long story short, the ship wrecked on a coral reef. They got to experience the ship wrecking as opposed to me just saying, you wake up on the beach, the last thing you remember is the ship going down and you getting dragged onto a longboat. I could have done that, but I've kind of done that kind of thing a little bit too much. Well, I've done that thing more often than I probably should have, just because it helps me move the plot, move things along, and players don't always like that. Try not to take the agency away from your players if you can help. If you can do it well, then they won't even notice you're doing it. And they're going to think everything that's happened because of the choices that they made. When really it happened because you wrote it in there, and because you're a great DM that I know you are, you're able to make them feel like they made it happen. Like Harrison Ford. You can choose any color as long as it's black. Or as magicians call it, the magician's choice. So the original adventure that I wrote was a lot more bare. Like the longboat scene, the waterfall scene, I added those in the game because we needed something to happen. And the random encounters I had wasn't feeling them. So I added the whole longboat thing, which actually worked out really nicely because of something else that happened. In fact, if you're a player in my game, you probably shouldn't be watching this. Spoiler alert! One thing as a DM that I still struggle with is straddling that fine line between giving them too much information or not giving them enough. Oftentimes, I personally felt that I'd given them too much when I have not actually given them that much. In fact, you're going to think that you're giving them way too much, and then later on, they're either going to have thought that hook, that thing that you were giving them was not that important, or part of something else, or they're just going to not remember it, even if they take notes about it. Just an example from my own personal games is, there's this one time in one conversation, and I remember exactly what conversation it was, and who it was with. I hinted at a quest line in a single conversation, and then this same quest came up months later in real life, and I reminded that player about that conversation, and she went back to her notes, but she hadn't taken very good notes. So even if your players are taking notes, they might not be that good. So they might not even remember. So it's a rule of thumb. It's probably a better idea to give them more than not. And even if they do figure out your plot and everything early, I mean, they're going to feel good about themselves. Like, yeah, I outsmarted the DM. I beat the DM. I'm great. And, I mean, who doesn't want to feel better about themselves? Let them come up with something. Like, if your players figure out your plot early, use that to expand your plot. Make it better. Like, maybe if they figure it out, that was just the beginning, because there's a whole other thing going on. The leader of 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 the leader. I don't know why I'm doing these. Now, the question remains, and I will answer this at the end. Should prologues be used in TTRPGs? That is the question. Alright, now it's time to get into the news of Dungeons and Dragons since our last episode. D&D live plays. They're fun. They're great to listen to, especially when you got time to kill. And guess what? There are not one, but two new episodes of Knights of Evening Star. If you're wanting more D&D live play, these are the episodes for you. If you want to listen to people play Dungeons and Dragons as opposed to just talking about it like I'm doing, that's the thing for you. There's also a new episode of Dragon Talk with Greg and Shelley celebrating the new release of Mythic Odyssey of Theros. They also speak on the forthcoming Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. In Icewind Dale, adventure is a dish best served cold. Beneath the unyielding night sky, you stand before a towering glacier and recite an ancient rhyme, causing a crack to form in the wall of ice. Beyond this yawning fissure, the caves of hunger await. And past this icy dungeon, a secret so old and terrifying that few dare to speak of it. The mad wizards of the Arcane Brotherhood long to possess that which the god of winter's wrath has so coolly preserved. As do you. What fantastic secrets and treasures are entombed in the sunless heart of the glacier? And what will their discovery mean for the denizens of Icewind Dale? Can you save 10 towers from the Frost Maiden's everlasting night? Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden is a tale of dark terror that revisits the forlorn, flickering candlelights of civilization known as 10 Towns, and sheds light on the many bone-chilling locations that surround the frontier settlements. This adventure is for levels 1 through 12. If you were a fan of that last Unearthed Arcana we mentioned, talking about feats, then you are going to love this next Unearthed Arcana, where we're getting 2 new subclasses. All you orcs, get ready for new patrons, and bards, get ready to go back to school. These new subclasses add lots of new stuff for you to do and to choose from. During the last month, I, along with several other writers, all participate in what's called the RPG's Writers' Workshop. The workshop is put on a couple of times a year. It was a month-long endeavor this time around, and I'm really, really excited to have been able to participate in it. Like, seriously, guys, this whole last month, I was pretty much always working on my RPG or getting inspiration for it. I watched a lot of movies revolving around this, and that adventure that we talked about in the beginning, that is the adventure that I wrote, and oh my gosh, guys, you gotta check it out. It's so cool. But not only check out mine, you gotta check out the other adventures that people wrote. There's a link to a Twitter feed where it has a bunch of people there that shared their adventures. So if you're looking for more adventures, if you want to support indie writers like me and other people that are also doing RPGs, because I definitely intend to start writing more adventures, then check it out. Support us, especially if you want more adventures on the cheap. So this is normally the part of the show where everybody comes out and sings a silly song. No, I'm just kidding. This is normally the part of the episode where I give a lesson from my past that I've learned to help better you so you don't make the same mistakes that I have made. So you can make new mistakes and share with the rest of the world why you don't want to make those mistakes. Now, instead of the lesson, this time we have a book review for the newest release of Wizards of the Coast called Mythic Odysseys of Theros. Or is it Theros? I'm never quite sure. Someone correct me. Is it Theros or Theros? Well, if you wish to read my initial reactions and overviews, you're going to have to check out the blog, which is connected to this episode. So that's going to also have a lot more details about everything I've talked about. This video is going to feature the actual review of the book. Like I said, if you want to read my full review, then you're going to have to check out the blog. Let's read it. I watched Incredibles earlier today, so I know how to speed read. Credits, yes, good. Contents is also good. Chapters, pages. Oh, and numbers. Lots of numbers. Numbers are important. Alright. Wow. All I can say is wow. No, I have a lot I can say, actually. So this book, it's designed in 3 parts. Technically 2 if you're just counting players and dungeon masters. But there's a part for players. The first part is for players. The second and third are for the dungeon master. But the second is about creating adventures, and the third is about putting stuff inside of those adventures, like monsters and loot tables and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's not just adventures, which is something I didn't really like much with Ghost of Saltmarsh. I felt like there was more adventures in there than actual world building or lore or settings, I guess. That's a video for another day. We can talk about Ghost of Saltmarsh later. So let's talk about part 1, starting off. So the part 1 is for the players. So the section encompasses the basic lore and setting, history of Theros. There's also a chapter entirely regarding how to create characters to be played in the mythical land of Theros. There is a lot of information in this section, but here are a couple of my personal highlights. The first one is that I really like the 2 pages on the different ages. There's only a couple of paragraphs per event or per age, and there's only a few ages. The information on the different ages is not very long, which is really good, so you don't have to worry about trying to remember 50,000 different things that happened in this one age, and then you got 10 things that happened in this other age, and 50 other things that happened in another age. You just got 2 paragraphs per age, and there's 3 or 4 ages. So that was really great. There are also several new playable races, and I'm really excited about that. The one I really like about it is Leonin. I think that's how you say it, Leonin. And they look super cool. I mean, who doesn't want more cat people? And these are lions. And they're not just regular cat people. They are lions. So if you like the idea of having your own pride in Dungeons & Dragons and just playing as a party of entirely lions, you're gonna love this. So the next couple chapters, it's focused entirely on the gods, who they are, where they live, as well as a little bit about the mortal plane, Theros. The gods in Theros are a lot different than the gods in D&D. From what I understand about the D&D gods, they aren't too involved. They're more abstract beings that are just existing, and our problems are too petty and small for them to really matter. And so the gods of Theros are a little bit more involved, taking inspiration from Greek culture, from Greek mythology, where the gods are actually interacted with their subjects is like shape-shifting into animals or just straight up being miniature versions of themselves. So there's something I really like about this specifically when it comes to these gods is that there's a piety system. It's
similar to how Renown works in regular D&D.
Only it's with the gods, and because this whole setting is tied closely to the gods and how the gods interact with the mortals and how what the gods do and mortals do and stuff like that. It's really, really exciting. So like Greek mythology stuff. So basically, if a PC does good and increasingly great deeds for their god, they're going to increase in piety. And the higher piety level you have, the better bonuses you get. I can't really say any of them off the top of my head, but if you would really like to know, buy the books. Support Wizards of the Coast so we keep getting more stuff. D&D is my favorite game. So the world of Theros itself is not very big at all. It's about 200 miles. And that's... don't actually think that's including the unexplored areas that are beyond the borders or the mysterious underwater areas. So I think just the main known areas, that is the 200. So there's 3 different planes of existence in this setting. There is Nyx, which is basically heaven, but you can only get there if you're a god. There's Theros, which is the material plane of existence where the adventures are mostly going to be taking place in. And then there's the Underworld, which is exactly what you think it is. It's the place where all of the dead go. Good or bad, you go here. And if you can pay for your fare, you're going to get taken to your new home in the Underworld and live there forever. Whether that's good or bad, I guess that depends on how you were as a person in life. So knowing all this lore and all this information about the setting is great, but other than just learning it to learn it, what's the point if you don't have adventures? How do you create mythic adventures in the lands of Theros? Turns out, very, very similar to how you create regular adventures in D&D. Using the good old Dungeon Master's Guide. Have one. Own one. Know one. That didn't make sense. That being said, if you want to have mythic adventures of world-changing, epic level proportions, there's no epic levels. This is the supplement for you. This is the setting you need to have. In this book, they take all the different gods, I think there's 12, and they tell you how you can run adventures featuring these gods. I'm already thinking of how I can string together multiple adventures. Now, the highest point of this whole thing of creating adventures for me was underwater, because D&D as a whole does not have enough rules or stuff for underwater, and I like the ocean. I like underwater stuff. So the fact that they have a whole section devoted to underwater and nautical adventures is like 2 thumbs up. Now the third part of this is all about loot and monsters. And the great thing about Mythic Odysseys of Theros is that there's no mundane magical items. Every magical item that your players are going to encounter is special. It has a name, it has a history. It was made by either a god or someone super, super skilled and powerful. You can't buy any of the magic items in the book, at least as far as I'm aware. Yeah. I like monsters. The more monsters I can find, the better adventures I can have, because that's more things I can throw at my players. Especially when I give them a hireling who's several levels above them, so I can really throw things at them. So there are actual NPCs other than just monsters in this book. So if you want more than just monsters, because I know you need more than just monsters, for some weird reason, you can't just give a monster intelligence so they can be smart and talk and whatever. There's going to be something in here for everyone. There's everything from CR half to CR 26. That's a 2 with a 6. This is 6 in sign language. So that's pretty much all my highlights of the book. So those are the highlights, and I need to let you know what I didn't like about the book, because not everything is going to be 100% hunky-dory, amazing, fantastical. See, this whole setting is based off of Greek mythology. Well, and Magic the Gathering, but that's besides the point. And because of that, there's a lot of difficult words for me, at least as far as I'm able to speak. Some of them were very difficult, some of them were weird looking, and threw a lot of them at me. I would have preferred, I'm okay with new words and learning words. I would have preferred if they used a little bit less and not as frequently. And also, it seems like one word had multiple different meanings, because it seemed like they used that same word for different things. At one point, I thought they were talking about cities, but then another point, I thought they were talking about the deities, or something describing the deities, so I wasn't entirely sure. The map. I like maps. I like fancy-looking maps. I like maps that have lots of details and stuff going on with them. This map does not have that. It looks like if I were to go on Google Maps and pull up a satellite of the Earth, some random place in the Earth, if I got rid of all the details about the roads and the cities and just had a map of the land, that's what it would look like. But less detailed. So this map definitely needs more detail, at least as far as the continental map goes. I definitely would have preferred if they had actual symbols of cities or just trees, mountains, something other than just colors, flat colors. With the map, the land of Theros is not very big, so to me, I prefer big, lots of places to explore. So 200 miles isn't a whole lot of room to work with. Imagine that's essentially where I'm at in Portland. I can get to the ocean. That's like 200 miles to the ocean. So it'd take a couple hours, and you're there. You can get back in a day. But if there's a lot of stuff to do, that's different. With that being said, it looks like a continent rather than a world. It looks like it's connected to a much larger world. Now, I know that Wizards of the Coast has released other Magic the Gathering settings, although much smaller, so I can only guess that Theros is, instead of being a plane that the book made it seem like it was, it's actually just part of a much larger landmass that is the Magic the Gathering world. So my overall impression of this book is 2 thumbs up, or as you'll see in my written review, 4.5 pastramis out of 5. This world is jam-packed with more than enough stuff to keep any adventuring party occupied, from the ones that want to go super epic level where you're fighting with or maybe even against the gods, to the less, more basic, mundane things. Like, there's going to be something for everybody, no matter what. I mean, it's D&D. So now that we've gotten the book out of the way, it's time to answer some questions. Oh wait, there's no questions, because none of you guys have asked me any questions. I'm here to answer your questions and help you all get better at D&D, while I'm also getting better at D&D. So if you have any questions about acting, about D&D, improv, anything about that kind of stuff. TTRPGs in general, doesn't even have to just be D&D. I've played other TTRPGs. Ask me. I want to answer your questions. Let's get some topics to talk about other than just the stuff that I want to talk about. To summarize everything that we've talked about, prologues. From my own experience, don't do them. If you really want to have a prologue, I would suggest writing something and sending it as an email to your group. And the ones that will want to read it, they will. And the ones that don't care, well, they won't. Maybe even the ones that do want to read it won't, because they just aren't able to for some reason. My opinion, my advice is to not have a prologue and just skip it. You can write out something later on for your players if you really want to, but just get into the game, get it started, because the purpose of D&D is to play a game, and if you're giving them a cinematic, something that they can't actually be part of, then they're listening to you speak, which, that can be, people have been listening to people speak for a long time. That's what you're doing right now. But you're playing a game. You want it interactive, you don't want to be talked at, you want interaction, at least as a player. From a player's perspective, they want to be doing stuff. They don't want to just be sitting there listening to you talk. As great as you might be. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes if you want to get your players to do what you want, just go with your gut and give them a bag of loot. Get over it. Okay? They're gonna get lots of stuff at some point anyways, and half of their magic items they're not even gonna remember. Like, I undersold a super awesome powerful sword to one of my players, and she never used it. Ever. I gave her plenty of opportunities, and I was really hoping she would use it because I really wanted to take it away from her. She never used it. So it's okay to give your players a lot of cool stuff, because they're more likely going to forget, and that's okay.
Here, take this inspiration for the road ahead. It's a long, dangerous, and treacherous one. You'll need all the help you can get.